workers, a lot of times they don't go into into detail or of learning. Sometimes the learning that they get for Aboriginal awareness training is just a book that they get 8 hours a year, and that's not good enough. They need to be out in the community, be visible, and so be part of the community so they learn.
Whenever you get together with a group of people, and you've got half of them that are Aboriginal and half of them that are not Aboriginal, you find a dynamic tension, I guess, that exists, that it's a give and a take, and it's a push and a pull. And there's a lot of times that the Aboriginal people sit back, because that's typical of what we do, and let them move forward. But every once in a while you find a hill that you're going to die on, and you stay on that hill. And what encourages me when I think of my board is the fact that my non-Aboriginal co-chair and some of the non-Aboriginal people around the table allowed me to stand up and die on that hill, and respected me for that. So I think that gives me hope when I look back at my 10 years on steering committees and boards, and I look around the table and I see the people that are leaving, and I see the people that are staying, and I know that there's some good people there that will continue to look at the world through Aboriginal focus and through an Aboriginal lens. And I'm not only talking about the Aboriginal people. I think it's that whole shared understanding of the of what we have taught the non-Aboriginal people.
As a governing body, it's given us a voice to take to our partners. So we partner with health regions, we partner with persons with developmental disabilities, partner with the school boards, and so we're able to take that voice to other tables then as well too. So while they don't have a system set up to bring Aboriginal voices to the table, we have our own, so we're taking that out. So I think that that's going to be powerful for us. I think the other thing is that we're creating our own other champions then for our voice. When we have the hill to die on, you know, it's not so much that the board's letting me die on that hill, but they're joining me.
There's a number of significant, really profound changes that have taken place, I think, just in the minds and the hearts of people to prepare for this idea that Aboriginal people can take care of their own children and have that right to do that. I mean, it's been there in written form, that it's not always been there in reality, and people being convinced that that's a capability.
I don't think there's any question that Aboriginal people want and are able and are willing to look after their own children. I guess the question I have is, do we have the flexibility? Do we have the innovation? Do we allow them the freedom? Is the Child and Family Enhancement Act too restrictive? It's those kinds of things that we may have to look at. It seems to me that we have too much structure and too much legislation to allow maybe some of the flexibility.
With the federal government, they're not funding some of those extra things. You have to be in care. When we get designated to do this service, we can't do it because the dollars don't flow to do that. And so you're right, Archie. There are some discrepancies there.
A story that I was told just this month by a lady from one of our northern communities, that she was out visiting her mother, and she happened to be there. It wasn't her mother, it was her aunt. And while she was there, the social workers dropped by, and they were going to bring their little grandchild, because they had apprehended her. And the grandmother couldn't sign she was illiterate, she couldn't read, so she didn't know any of the papers that she had to sign. And they weren't going to leave her with her because she couldn't sign the papers. If a social worker would have come to our home, all of us would have been gone immediately, right then and there, living in a small house with no running water, no central heat, no bathroom inside. And yet, I was raised in a home that was very loving, and I was given all sorts of morals and confidence in who I was as a person. I was able to go forth in adulthood and be the person that I am today. And I think some of those stigmas still exist out there.
I too grew up in a large family in a very small house and sharing everything. I mean, when the baby came out of the crib, that baby came to me to look after, and a new baby came in, and we just managed. Not to say that we didn't grow up learning the things that we that we should have learned, you know, the sense of responsibility, contributing and not taking, but having to contribute, being responsible for our families, being proud of who we were, and the values that I would think that most families, ordinary families would have, are there. And I don't think it changed because we didn't have all the, quote, amenities. We live a little differently than the cities or these other communities, and perhaps you have to look at that when you're trying to assess whether, in fact, our children are safe.
The other thing we need to do is educate the people, and that's all people, about families. And we need to value families. And that means whether you're European or Aboriginal. So I'm really proud of Alberta for that, and I think Alberta can also be a leader in hopefully educating the rest of the Canada about Aboriginal families.
We have to speak up. We have to be the spokesman on behalf, and you're put in a position, or I find as an Aboriginal chair, you aren't caring for the whole board, but you are putting that Aboriginal emphasis out there, and quite often it gets blurred, and people pretend like they've got a lot of knowledge and they really don't. So another challenge is to make sure people working with Aboriginal people are educated and know, and it's not just a pretend, it's not just a little piece of stuff. I mean, I would love to take a whole region and do a pilot, and I would love to see if everybody in that region saw 500 years.
One of the big things that I'd like to pass on to new co-chairs is very key to work together, to communicate on a regular basis, and to sit down and plan and work with your CEO so that you're all up to date with what's going on. There's a whole bunch of things related around the job itself that can be very challenging, so I'm really glad to hear that there's going to be some co-chair training. And stuff.
We struggled initially with the concept of PAC around should it be one separate made up of Aboriginal people away from the Assembly and to deal with these issues. And rightly so, we felt that we needed an area that we can talk quite comfortably as Aboriginal people to other Aboriginal people about some issues, but also it was a real support. It's an area, for example, somebody would hear a rumor, or somebody would hear a comment out, and there's a room where people would initially react and get angry about a comment or about an issue, and then as we further discussed it, everything calmed down, and more of a practical approach around let's make sure that that's really was the intent of the comment or intent of the whatever that was, and it helped, and that's the support.
I think we started working as a team, the board, the co-chairs. That was something that, you know, we were able to work together. I think as an Aboriginal person, sometimes we kind of isolate working separately, but we were able to work as a team.
Board members and co-chairs have to remember always is that you were an arm of government, and not to forget that arm.
It's important though in any change, or if you're going to have any kind of change, you have commitment from the top level or the senior people, from the premier on through the ministers, to hopefully have someone champion the cause eventually. I like the idea of where, for instance, Mrs. Klein has been a champion for children in the province and has a task force now, and I wonder if one day there would be something on the same kind of level where there'd be a champion for Aboriginal children in the province.
I'd really encourage the powers that be to continue on the co-chair structure and the 50% Aboriginal board representation. I think it's imperative that remains. I know that we've had some, talk in the past and maybe in the future that this might not always be there. And I think that it's imperative that it stay like that. I think the reason we've come as far as we have is because we've had the boards that were made up with the Aboriginal representation.
We're recognizing that it is everybody's problem. We have to have that compassionate spirit. We have to have we have to allow people to be very proud of where they come from and who they are. And I think that's there. I think we've got a long way to go. I'm delighted and hopeful for the new board members that are coming forward. We're going to be the founding members and passing it on, and it's exciting because it's something to be reckoned to in the province. And we do know that Aboriginal kids are going to be the majority. They're going to be 20% of our population very soon. So we have got a whole workforce. We've got a whole bunch of people that we haven't even tapped in. So I'm hopeful to the resources in which the Aboriginal people are going to bring Alberta and Canada to the forefront.
I was reaching to the sky, trying to pluck a star. I was hopeful for a while, but they're just a little too far. Round and round I go. Where I stop, well, I don't know.
I wasn't quite sure about the co-chair model in the beginning. I was apprehensive. But now that we have worked in it, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It has, for us, for our region, for myself and my colleague, it's been probably one of the best experiences of our life. It has taught us about different way of doing business. We recognize that we need to change the way we have been providing these services. It is a way of thinking that we need to really integrate in what we are doing, everything that we are doing, so that when we are providing services to Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal people, it is ingrained in our thoughts and in our processes.
I come from a corporate background of results-oriented and get there fast. And one thing I've learned from Art and from our other Aboriginal colleagues is that in order to go fast, you have to go slow. And that's been a very valuable learning that I keep trying to keep reminding myself about.
I would agree with that too. On our board, it's the corporate move forward, accomplish challenges. We have a problem, we have to solve it. Let's get on with the work, and that's always present. But I think the Aboriginal people bring more of a peace and a calmness and more thoughtfulness to some of the decision-making processes. And for me, that has been a really good experience to slow me down and put more thought into the decision.
I too come from a background where the loudest voice and the person that could pound on the table the longest and the loudest got heard the most, and so coming into an environment where I noticed that some of the people at the board table, they weren't saying much and hardly ever said anything at a meeting. But then all of a sudden, when they were given the opportunity to speak, they had a lot to say. So far it's just us, Children's Services, so we just keep plugging along, but it would be nice to see those other ministries come online as well.
I think from a non-Aboriginal perspective, and I'm not really prepared to speak to policy or practice, but what I have seen and what I have really noticed and what has changed me personally is a growing awareness and knowledge and understanding of Aboriginal people, both First Nations and Métis, and the challenges that they face. I think I've also become aware that as a European or white society, we have for probably 400 years attempted to civilize the noble savage. Then we tried to assimilate. We've tried to subjugate. We've tried to annihilate. tried damn near everything except to understand and accept. And I think what I've seen within children's services over the last few years is an openness and a willingness to understand. And so much of it is subliminal, you don't even realize that there is racism or discrimination occurring. Living close to the Musquatchees Reserve at Hobina, I see a lack, a loss of hope amongst the young people there. And somehow as children's services and as a society, we have to find a way to address that lack of hope. We need to somehow start to work together to have more success.
I was reaching to the sky, trying to pluck a star. I was hopeful for a while, but they're just a little too far.